Good morning, everybody. It's Sunday, November the 7th at about 20 past 9 on the daylight savings time. Anyway, you get an extra hour of sleep today. I wanted to begin a quick summary of the Apology, Plato's Apology, which is basically the trial of Socrates. As I mentioned, the apologia literally means his self-defense, and this is what he is really doing in this dialogue, or really monologue, and presentation to the Athenian court, of which he had many friends, both on the jury and in the audience. Socrates is indicted on three different charges. One, the corruption of the youth, and we've spoken somewhat. What could that mean? Could that mean that they are taught to thought, taught to really thinking, thinking through ideas, attuned to the power of ideas that may change the world, may bring a better notion of the good and the good society? And what is the threat that he would be indicted for such a thing to the state as it is, to the powers that be? And secondly, an indictment of introducing new gods into the city state. As Socrates mentions in the Apology, his adherence is to Apollo and the Delphic Oracle, and that will be part of the long defense, what I will call the philosophical digression part of the appeal to the god, to the oracle. And this may threaten something, a different type of authority is being introduced into the state, and from there we are changing somewhat the government, right? We can think about it that way, changing the power structure. So this is another thing worthy of looking at and thinking about. And then thirdly, the charge of atheism. So there are three basic, which literally means no longer a belief in the God, although the word atheism is a complex word in itself. Materially speaking, the alpha privative means you're away from a notion of the gods, which means that the gods somehow existed back in the day, which is obviously an argument against the Darwinian notion of natural selection and the principles of natural selection and evolutionary principles, as well as many other ideas of the 19th century that were against religion, or at least confronted religion and the belief in a transcendental being, as well as, the great chain of being. Anyway, we'll go back to that. But I want to, again, emphasize the structure of the dialogue, the Apology. Dialogue hyphen monologue. It is dialogical in that it's an address to us. It's an address of Socrates also to himself. It is actually something that's very futurely oriented, as we see later. So the first movement takes place in our edition on pages, the opening that takes place on pages 21, 22, the opening speech, in which Socrates begins to say he would adhere to the law, and he's also trying to defend himself against characterizations of himself, that he's an accomplished speaker, very sophisticated with rhetoric and embroidered words, very good at presenting the worser case and making it seem the better. We'll mention some of those things in the text itself, but the dialogue begins on line 17 in Plato's dialogues that are extant, and for us, page 22 in the Hackett edition, translated by Grody. So the opening speech begins that he will appeal to the truth and also to his age, that he no longer or never has been to a court and doesn't know the rules. So he will just speak spontaneously and of the truth. So this is very important to keep in mind, that Socrates announces he is a truth sayer. He is someone who is a truth teller. This is what his principles are, to search for the truth. This is the moment of his investigation, where it crystallizes everything in some kind of new truth, if you will. So we'll talk about that. The sentence is, he wants to concentrate your attention, and this is line 18, to whether what I say is just or not. For the excellence of a judge lies in this, so that of a speaker lies in telling the truth. So he's very, very good here in terms of the first set of appeals. Again, the appeal to the authority of the law, he will adhere to the law. The appeal to his own spontaneity, which he aims to be very transparent as possible without the rhetorical embroidery. And then thirdly, of course, his age. He's, a stranger to the court, never been, and he's also an old man. So this is all going on in the opening speech, and you can think of this as, a court of law today. How does a lawyer begin the opening address to ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Usually by giving a speech about who the person is and what the procedure will be. Anyway, the next section is basically the plan of the defense, second movement, if you will. And again, I've likened this to a symphony, of which the overture is this opening speech and opening address. And then we begin to get into the first movement, which is the plan of his defense. And the plan of his defense is both basically to take on two groups of accusers, those of the past and those of the present. So first of all, he wants to dismantle and dissuade the jury of all these negative characterizations that have gone on about Socrates, that the fighting shadows, the one that is the person that swings about there, and he's quoting Aristophanes when he says swinging in the sky, saying walking on air, and talking a lot of nonsense about things of which I know nothing at all. Again, speaking of things above on the horizon, and at the same time, those things underneath the earth. So this is very important for us to keep in mind, that he is going to take apart this past characterization of himself, and he also wants to engage that he does not teach for a fee. He is not like his antagonists here, the sophists, of which, as you remember, Meno is one who is taught by Gorgias of the school of Thessaly and the school of the sophists. Gorgias is the major sophist. He mentions him in the Apology. So moving forward, he's going to dismantle that in that plan of defense, and he's saying that the accusations of the past have prejudiced the jury, and that he wants that prejudice to be taken away so that he can get a fair trial. So that's the first moment of the plan of defense. The other plan of the defense is the answer the accusations in the present, which he finds to be lesser in some ways as accusations, even though they're formal indictments. He still thinks that the past has created this slander and reputation around him, of which he cannot really bring himself free. He cannot get himself free from it. So this is the general plan of the defense. Then the formal defense begins after a moment of a philosophical digression. So the third movement is both, third and fourth movements could be considered both the philosophical digression in terms of wisdom that Socrates, and we see at work there the method of Socratic ignorance. Socrates is told by a friend that the Godhead, Apollo, at the Delphi there's no one more wiser than Socrates. Socrates does not believe this, and he begins to tell us of the journey he took to test this wisdom that he supposedly has. So he went to see First of all, the statesmen, and then the poets, and then the craftspeople. And what he learned from each of them is that they really don't know the idea behind of what they do. They do not know the theory of what they do. The politician thinks he administers, but it has nothing about the ideas of what it means to be a statesperson, what it means to do something for the good. And he doesn't have this in mind. This is something we can take up to when we get to Machiavelli and the Prince and see how this may be corrected later by the Prince. Um, and so he then, makes this claim, at least I'm ignorant of what the statesman's idea of the good is, but the statesman thinks he knows, but he doesn't know, even though he practices it. So Socrates concludes that because of his ignorance and his awareness, and again, I mentioned awareness, consciousness of ignorance, that he is wiser than the others, including the statesman in this first case, and then the poet as well, and the craftspeople, because they are not aware of their ignorance. They're not aware of how much they do not know about their particular practices, etc. This is very, very crucial to keep in mind. And in some ways, we can go back to Gramsci and say, in a way, the statesman, the poet, and the craftspeople are engaged in spontaneous philosophy. They function. They function as politicians. They function as poets. They write beautiful, lyrical, or even for that matter, epic dramas. But when it comes to understanding the ideas and the praxis that is involved and what's being overturned in the common sense, they're very ignorant of this and very unaware. Same thing with the craftspeople not knowing. So this is happening throughout sections 21, 22, 23, pages 26, 27 in the text. So very important to keep this in mind too. And he concludes, right? And then he talks about the formal charges. He talks about the men that follow him around, trying to answer the first indictment. The first indictment, again, is this corruption of the youth. And the interesting thing is that he inverts this into a different dialogue with Meletus, his accuser. He begins to talk of improvers of mankind. This is a phrase used by Meletus, but Socrates will engage this in his, particular way and say, you seem to say everybody's an improver of mankind, but not me. Why is that? Why am I the particular? Why am I singled out? And he's trying to dismantle again these charges of the corruption. Corruption is not getting paid, right? Obviously, because he doesn't get paid. So you have to ask the question again, and I'm going to go to this in class more actively. What does it literally mean to corrupt the youth? What is this process that is going on in terms of why the young come to him? Because of his service to the god? Or is it because of the way he acts as a gadfly in the marketplace, is able to question everything, throw people into this stingray numbness that he is capable of? I mean, what does it really mean, here? So he'll go through each charge, and then the other charge, of course, is this introduction of new gods, and he does not believe in gods at all. So he takes both the third and the second charge and turns it around, and he says that he is accused of introducing new gods. How is that possible if he's an atheist? He must believe in gods if he believes in demigods or new gods. So this is the riddle that he engages with Meletus too. So I ask you again to read very carefully the pages 31 and 32 on this and the prolonged defense, right? Yeah. And then, you will see this formal defense at work. You will see how he dismantles each step of the way. However, as we know, then the jury deliberates, and then he would go on, and talk about Well, he'll give a summation of everything before the jury. And this begins, pages 33 and 34, 35. This is where he begins to sum up where he is and what will happen if he's acquitted, and what happens and how he can, go about his business without harming anybody. And he wants to, again, Socrates is not the one who wants to die only, but he's trying to confront this, anticipation, if you will, of the death penalty. So the fifth movement, if you will, after the opening address, the plan of the defense, the formal defense, the philosophical digression in which Socratic ignorance is pulled, is really about, what he still offers to society. He'll give this as a summation of the opening arguments, etc. So there's a nice caesura, a pause in the dialogue in which we come back to the Ader later, and if you look at page 36, this happened when the city was still a democracy, right? In the unjust course. When the oligarchy was established, the 30 summoned me to the hall along with 4 others and ordered us to bring Leon from Salamis that he thought might be executed. And they gave many such orders to many people in order to implicate as many as possible in their guilt. Then I showed again, not in words, but in action, that if it were not rather vulgar to say so, death is something I could not care less about. This is pages 36 and 37. But that my whole concern is not to do anything unjust or impious, against the gods, against the ethics, against principle. That government, powerful as it was, did not frighten me into any wrongdoing. When we left the hall, the other 4 went to Salamis and brought in Leon, but I went home. I might have been put to death for this had not the government fallen shortly afterwards. There are many still who were witnesses to this event. So he is going back in his past to talk about an activity that has happened, and that he's in some ways on trial for this as well as, quote, the corruption of the youth, introduction of new gods, and, the atheism charge. So then he asks the question rhetorically. He's very good at this. Page 37, again, I'm reading from sections 32E. Do you think I would have survived all these years if I were engaged in public affairs and acting as a good man must? Come to the help of justice and consider this the most important thing. Far from it, men of Athens, nor would any other man. Throughout my life, in any public activity I may have engaged in, I am the same man as I was in private life. I never come to an agreement with anyone to act unjustly. And this is a very crucial statement. I will not engage, in this kind of activity to act unjustly. And again, he is claiming he is a just man, right? Right? Neither with anyone else nor with any of those who they slanderously say are my pupils from the back in the day. These never have been anyone's teacher. If anyone, young or old, desires to listen to me when I am talking and dealing with my own concerns, I have never begrudged this to anyone. But I do not converse when I receive a fee and not when I do not. I am equally ready to question the rich and the poor if anyone is willing to answer my questions and to listen to what I say. This is a very important passage about how his teaching, in a way, is not only specific to one thing. Yeah? So, yeah, to return to the text, and excuse me for the short pause there. He does say, I'm equally ready to question the rich and the poor if anyone is willing to answer my questions and to listen to what I say. And I cannot justly be held responsible for the good or bad conduct of these people, as I never promised to teach them anything and have not done so. If anyone says that he has learned anything from me or that he heard anything privately that the others did not hear, he assured that he is not telling, be assured he is not telling the truth. So he wants to, again, set the stage um, to um, finalize his defense here. This is what he's really doing, finalizing his defense. And he's talking about his old moments, both with the tyrants, what he did in terms of acting on behalf of justice, and also that he never meant any kind of injustice through his teaching or the meetings with young people or old, and never took money from that. He would never discriminated by whom he would question and who was willing to listen. So this is very important to remember in terms of how he sums up his arguments. All right, the next part is really about the death penalty, how he responds to this. And this is the sixth movement. So the fifth movement, again, is a summation and also his reasoning about why he should not be put to death or given the death penalty. Obviously, it isn't enough. He receives the death penalty, and there's a long digression about, what will happen in terms of consequences to those who have convicted him, and then he addresses his friends who voted to acquit him. So there's a dual address to those that convicted, where there's a warning about the unleashing of the power of, ironically, those students who supposedly he did not just teach, right? That they will come back with a vengeance. And again, this is happening on page 42, the prophecy. This is sections 39C and D. Again, the prophecy of those that convicted him, to those that convicted him. He says, you will be, after my death, you will experience a vengeance much harder to bear than which you took in killing me. And he'll talk about that. There will be more people to test you, whom I've now held back, but you did not notice it. They will be more difficult to deal with, us. And as they will be younger, and you will resent them even more. You were wrong if you believe that by killing people, you will present or prevent anyone from reproaching me and for not living in the right way. To escape such tests is neither possible nor good, but it is best and easiest not to discredit others, but to prepare oneself to be as good as possible. With this prophecy, to convicted me, I part from you. And then he goes on to those that acquitted him, in which he says, I thank you, etc. And what has happened to me may be a good thing, and for those of us that believe death to be an evil are certainly mistaken. So this is, again, he's addressing his friends. You're not going to miss me. I want to assure you in a way that my death is important, it is significant in terms of the future. And he said also that the familiar sign he usually got from the gods was not there for him to continue to live. So he's accepting, again, his death in this moment. So this sets up the transition to the next part of the dialogue, the seventh and final movement, which is a long meditation on death. And as mentioned, we are going to be viewing the painting Jacques-Louis David, where you will see Socrates pointing his finger up to the horizon and grasping the hemlock with his other hand, right? As he accepts the death penalty and is ready to take the poison. So the poison there, again, is an entry point, if you will, into what he absolutely considers the better part of death. One is the eternal sleep. He meditates on that, it is the end of time. It is the end of your time. You begin the eternal sleep in this outside of time. And this is one description of death, but the other is the beginning of the long conversation, that the soul transmigrates to the place where the just live, right? And this is what he looks forward to have that great conversation with those of the past who were unjustly convicted or those unjustly treated in life who had managed to overcome through their writings, their teachings, etc. So this is a very interesting moment in the text, and we will see this at work in the death of Socrates in the painting. So he also then leaves a parting word to reproach his own son, his legacy, if they do not, take care of the good life, or what he considers the examined life, the principled life towards excellence, that they should be reprimanded for pursuing other things, such as money only, these kind of things. So this is very, very important, to keep in mind, that he wants to leave a legacy that, the superficial things that he considers superficial things in life, the pursuit of money, fame, fortune, etc., are to be confronted by this, by the by not only his legacy, but those who store his legacy, those who are, acquitting him. And this would include Crito, whose figure we will analyze in the painting of Jacques-Louis David, done in 1787. So he ends the dialogue again with, "Now the hour to part or to leave has come. I go to die, you to live. Which of it goes for the better? It is known to no one except the God." And again, you see, he appeals to the ultimate authority, the unknown, but at the same time, Socrates is convinced that his legacy, his notion of the principled examined life will live on. And he's certainly been held to be right. We still read the Apology very avidly, and we practice it in many ways because we speak about character and character development. And to return to Aristotle for a second, we certainly speak about the building of moral excellence, if you will, or ethical excellence. So we will return to this theme again in this course, vis-a-vis both Plato and Aristotle. And I would like you to read the last sections of the Phaedo on the immortality of the soul. And this is going to be actually the fulcrum on which Jacques-Louis David paints the death of Socrates. He is reading this very, 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 very carefully, read it carefully, and painted this, magnificent neoclassical work. So we will speak about that this week. I thank you for listening. Hopefully this has been helpful in terms of the 7 movements, how they're integrated. You can certainly go back and look at the Meno and show, again, why Socrates is threatening as a corrupter, the numbing, the stingray effect. But at the same time, what is really the stake? This is really our question. What is the stake of this character in ancient philosophy? What is the stake for our times in terms of critical investigation and clearing that space so that we can begin to think once again instead of going mindlessly as sleepwalkers through the functionings of everyday life? Okay, I thank you, and we'll see you for another one of these videos very soon. Thank you.